Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this triple row wire macrame bracelet. And this is it. So this is how it looks, and I've just chosen these beads, some purple coated hematite and then copper wire, but obviously you can choose whatever combination you want. So it looks like this, and you get this kind of cuff style bracelet because you have the rigidity from the wire, but it's still a basic macrame technique, just with wire instead of cord. And this is the example that I'm going to be showing you in the tutorial today, so with these colours. But you can also do it in different ways. Like I said, this is another example that I have where I'm just using some rondelle beads, so it doesn't just have to be rounds. The rondelles also give a really nice look, and I just use some blue coloured wire here, just so it doesn't have to be just your basic metal wires, but you can also use the wire in different colours, and then here I have the beads as nice and clear. So they give completely different looks and final designs depending on the materials that you use. So if you want to learn how to do these, then keep watching. And these are the things that we're going to use. Now the wire that I'm using in this case is this copper wire, and that's just the colour that I've chosen to work with. You can use anything. This is a 0.6mm wire. Now I like using this for macrame in general when I'm doing wire macrame because it's quite nice and malleable and it's not too tough to work with. You can also use something like a 0.8mm, but in general I do like to use this. And then for the beads I'm using these, and this is a strand of some purple coated hematite. They just look like this, and these are roughly 6mm in size, so the diameter is probably around 6mm. But you can again use different sizes of your beads here, or gemstones, whatever you're using, and also some different shapes. For instance, the one I showed you in the intro, I've used some rondelles for that one as well. So you can use anything really that you have, and also different sizes, so maybe an 8mm or even up to 10mm, or even smaller beads as well. That's completely up to you. This is just what I'm going to be using in this, and I just thought the purple colour would go nicely with the copper wire. So as for the finding that we need, in this case I'm going to be finishing off my bracelet using some ribbon ends, so like these, and these specific ones are about 8mm in the width here, but you can really use different sizes. It all depends on the final size of your bracelet. So if you use a gauge higher than this, so about 0.8mm, you might need to use one that's a bit wider, but anything really from 8mm to 10mm should work fine. And then obviously if you're using smaller, you can make them smaller as well. And then I'm just using a selection of my findings here that I'm going to be using. So just some jump rings, a lobster claw clasp and extended chain. You can obviously use whatever findings that you want to. And then finally, what I'm also going to use to help me finish off the bracelet at the end, so to use them with my ribbon ends here, is this glue. So it's the E6000 glue, and I use this to put inside the ribbon end to make it nice and secure, but I'm going to show you that as we get there. So then get all your materials together that you're going to use, and then let's get started. So for us to get started, what we first need to do is cut a length of wire, and first we need to cut these 5 lengths, and they're about 70 centimeters each, so that's what we need to cut first. And to begin with, all these are going to be our holding wires, just for the first section on the bracelet. But once we start adding beads, 2 of these are also going to turn into the working wires, along with the next one. And the other one we need to cut is this length, and that needs to be about 120 centimeters long. And what we're going to do is, because this is so long, because we're going to be actually doubling it over, so we're going to get 2 working wires out of this. So that's all the wires you need to cut. And then what I'm going to be working on with this is my macrame board, and it has all these notches around the edge all the way around, so it's going to make it a lot easier for us to work with. And then I'm going to take my 5 short lengths of wire here and have them all put together at one end like this, so they're roughly even, and then just choose one slot and put all my wires through that, and just have a little bit of tail at the back here, and then bend that back just so it stays in place. And then here we have our wires attached to a board. So now we can start the macrame part. So I'm also just going to attach these wires on the bottom of my board, just so they're held in place to begin with here. Because what we need to do now is first a little section of just macrame, which is where we're going to get our other piece of wire in. So this is the longest length of wire that you cut. We need to use this to just start off with macrame on the bracelet here. So what you want to do with that is just get that long piece and get one end we want this to go underneath all of the wires that are attached to the board already. So for now, all these wires in the middle are all the holding wires. And then this long one that we're using now is going to be the first working wire. And what I'm just going to do is put it under like this, and then put my two ends together of this long piece, and then just try and gently pull it like this, so I know roughly where the middle is. You don't need to put a proper bend in there, just so you roughly know. So I know the middle now is placed underneath all these wires. So now to start the macrame, what we're going to be using in this is the basic square knot. So all you want to do is try and just keep the middle of this long wire underneath all the others, and then as a regular square knot you want to just take one side. I usually always just start with my left one, that's just what comes natural to me. You can start with the other one, as long as you stay consistent throughout. So like that, and then you take the other side, in my case the right one, bring that over the one you just brought over all the ones in the middle, and then back underneath that, underneath all the wires in the middle as well, and then up through the loop on this side, the first side that you did. And then you want to then pull them tight, try and make sure that roughly the middle of this long piece of wire stays underneath. This is just for the very first knot, just so you have about even length on both sides to work with. And then you pull it tight like this, and then as I'm pulling my knots tight, and you'll see that throughout, I like to just run my fingers like this, because that helps keep the wire nice and straight and not give any kind of unwanted bends in it. So that's the very beginning. We now have this long length attached to all our holding wires. So then to finish off that square knot, because this is just one half of it, we need to take the wire from the opposite side and put that over like this to make that loop, and then bring the other one over that here, and then back underneath that one and everything in the middle, and then up through the loop like this. And then now it's already attached to the first one, so all you need to do now is pull. You don't have to hold this as well to get it in the middle. And as you're pulling it nice and tight like so, get a nice tension, use a bit of force, because then you'll find that your knots with your wire become very even throughout, and it almost becomes a bit machine looking. So like that, and just straighten out your wires as you do this. So this is now our first full square knot with the wire here, and the long length that we have is now nice and securely attached to all our holding wires. And if you're a bit unsure about how to do basic macrame knots, I do have a video on how to do a few basic macrame knots. I'll put a link to that in the description box. And the principles of doing macrame with wire and cord is really the same basic principles. So you're doing all the same knots. The only thing obviously that's different is the material that you're working with. So that's all you have to keep in mind, is how you're kind of working with the wire to make sure you keep it nice and straight and don't get curves and kinks and bends in it really. Because with cord obviously you don't have to worry too much about that. But otherwise we just want to continue now making a few more square knots. So again, start from the same side that you started with on the first knot, that's my left one, and then take the other one and come over that and down through everything, underneath everything in the middle, and then up through the loop on the opposite side, and then pull tight like so, and then you can always double pull it, so go in and pull it again, just make sure it's nice and tight, and then just run your fingers and your hands over your working wires here to make sure that they stay straight. And to finish it off, do the other half of the square knot, we start with the opposite side, put that over, and then the other one over that, and underneath everything in the middle, crossing underneath, and then up through the loop like so. And then as you pull it tight, try and make sure you get the same amount of tension every time you pull your knots tight. That way you'll get a nice and even look throughout. So you just want to continue doing a few of these knots. How many you want to do is completely up to you. It depends how long you want that first piece to be before you start adding in your beads. I'm just going to probably do about 4 or 5 knots of these, and then I'll show you how we add in the beads. So I've now ended up making 5 square knots here, and I'm happy with the size that that's going to make. So what I need to do now is get all my wires into position so we can start adding on the beads. So I'm going to release all my holding wires here that we've been macrame onto, and then just kind of separate them out. And what you'll find is you'll probably find that they're almost lying next to each other where they're coming out from all your knots there. You want to just basically separate them out so you have 2 on each side and then 1 in the middle here. And what you can just do is put the side ones into the slot for now, just to get them out of the way. So the one that's automatically kind of in the middle, just stick that in the middle as it is. And then I'm just going to pull these out a little bit so they're coming out a little bit more at an angle from the knots, and it's just to give a bit more space to this middle one first. Because then what I'm going to do is go back to my 2 original working wires here, so the ones that I made all these first macrame knots with, and then I'm going to do the same, still doing the square knot, but I'm only just going to do it around the center one. So just bring them over the top of all the other wires and then do your square knot again, but only around the center wire there that you've separated out, but just the exact same way. So like this. That's why if you just put the others to the side to kind of get them out of the way so you don't get confused with them. You can just put that middle one back into the board and then tighten that as nice and tight as you can, and then you'll get that knot, the next one, forming just around the center one, the center wire. And just finish it off by doing the other side the exact same way, like that. So now what I'm going to do is, when we have this center one separated out and then a 2 towards the sides, each side there, I'm just going to add 1 bead to the very middle one that we just made a knot around and just push that up. And it's just mainly right now it's just for guidance, because we now need to make some knots on the sides using all the wires that we have on the sides here. But I just want to know where to put them, so I'm just putting this first bead just as a guideline. So what I'm going to do is just focus on working on one side at a time, so you can put the others kind of out of the way and then just focus on these. And then you have the wire coming from the last square knot that you made on the middle one. That's going to be one of your working cords again. And then you have the 2 that you separated out coming through the center part of the first macrame part you made. Again, just take the one furthest to the left on the left side here, and then put that to the side, and then you have this in the center then. And that's the one that's going to be the holding cord, a holding wire for the outside row, and the other 2 are going to be the working wires. So we just need to make 1 square knot around that center one as well. And again, I just start from the same side, so the one to the left. If you start with the one to the right, just start with that one. As long as you stay consistent, you'll get a nice even look. And put that over, we're just making it around this one, and put the other one underneath both. And then just gently pull here, and then just don't pull completely tight straight away, because we want this knot to be placed in a specific place. And then you can just push the bead out of the way a little bit, because you know where you need to put it. So keep tightening it until you're happy with where it sits. You can always push it back up just to check that your knot here is going to sit roughly about the middle of this bead. So to the side, but in the middle of it. So like that. When you're happy, take the other side to finish off the knot, to do 1 full square knot. Like this. You can always place your holding wires into your board if you're working with a macrame board. It makes it a little bit easier. That's the brilliant part about having that, because you got all the slots around the edges. So that's the first one on this side. We need to repeat. We can just put these out of the way, put them to the side that they belong to, and then just repeat the same thing on the other side here. So now that we've made this first knot on both sides, we now have all our wires in the right position, and we're ready to add on our beads to all our lengths of wire. So since this is a 3-row macrame bracelet, what we need to do is add it onto 3 lengths of our wire. So it's going to be all the holding wires, and it's going to be the same holding wires throughout the whole bracelet. So the one in the very center, the one where I already added a bead here, that's going to be one of our holding wires. We need to add beads to that. And then the 2 center ones, 1 on each side. So the ones that were holding cord, or the holding wire, for the knots that you made on the side here. So that's also going to be the holding wires throughout the whole bracelet. So you want to add beads onto all these 3 wires. How many you add is completely up to you. Depends what size of materials you're using and also how large you want your bracelet to be. But you can just add a certain amount. Always have one more on the middle one than the 2 outer ones. But you can always, if you added too many, take some off at the end if you've used enough. Or if you haven't added enough, just use whatever you have and then add more as you get to it. So just put whatever amount of beads that you want on there. So I've now added all my beads onto my holding wires here, and then what you just want to do is push them down so you have some space to work with here, making your knots. I'm just going to leave one up in the middle there. The rest I'm going to push down on all my lights so I have all this space to then start working with. So to cage in our first bead, this one in the middle that we're going to do first, what we're going to be using are these 2 working wires. So those are the 2 inside ones from each, one inside one from each side that we did on the first knots on each side here. Those we're going to be using to make our knots around the center wire. So again, I'm going to be doing the same knot, starting from the same side as I did all the other times. So take my left one over first, make sure you have the bead there and then nothing else so you have the space to work with. And then take the one from the right side, put it underneath just the middle one, over the first one you put over, but underneath just the middle one. So the other 2 here, pretend like they're not there. Put it underneath there and come straight up on the other side of that. So you only go underneath that center one, as you can see there, and they come up through the loop. So it's the exact same knot, just making sure that you only grab the center wire there. And then as you tighten it, you'll find that it sits right underneath that bead, and then that cages in that bead nicely. So to finish off that knot, try and keep your wires as nice and straight as possible, or without bends anyway, without bends and kinks. Take the other side, put that over, again, go underneath just the middle one, and then up through the loop. So your wire's just coming around the middle one, and then tighten that, like so. And then there you have your very first bead on, and it's nicely caged in with your square knot. So that's the center bead, the very first one. So now we need to move to the outside on both sides, but we'll start with one at a time. So I'm just going to start with my left one, push up my bead like this, so it's going to sit right there. We'll just do one bead at a time, and then we'll take the working wire that we just used for the center knot, the one that's to this left side automatically. We take that and we now need to use that on this side as well, and then we need to use the other working wire, so this one, and then we just do a square knot just like the other times. Put the left one over first if that's what you're doing, or start with the other one if that's the one you're starting with, and then take the one from that middle knot, put it just underneath only that outside wire. Just make sure you only catch that, and then as you're tightening them like that, it's going to cage in that bead nicely. And then the other side to finish off the knot, again only around this one holding wire, and pull it nice and tight. And again, try and make sure you get the nice and consistent tension throughout your whole piece, so all your knots are going to end up looking nice and similar. So that's that side. Move over to here, do the exact same thing, just push up one bead, just repeat. So take your 2 working wires on this side, and do your square knot. So this is the only knot that we're using throughout this bracelet, and pull it nice and tight. You can always adjust it if you're not quite happy with how it sits. Rather catch it now before you continue and then go back and see you're not quite happy, then you can't really do anything about it. So catch it while you're there, and then finish off the square knot. Like this. And pull it nice and tight, like so. And there you go. That's that bead now caged in. So you have one in the center, the very first one, and then one on each side. And that's basically how you're going to continue now. So now you're in position for the one inside wire on each side. So these two working wires are going to go back in to do the middle one. So you push up one bead there, like so, and then just do another square knot around just that center wire, and that's going to cage in that. And that's just all you do throughout the whole piece. So you just continue like this until you reach the length that you want it to be. So I've continued for a little bit now, and I've added a few beads into it, and what I just want to do is give you a little design tip. Because you can either leave it like this if you want to, if you just prefer this look, but what you could also do is get some smaller beads. So in this case, this is just some black agate, and these are about 3mm in size. And obviously you need to make sure that you get some where the hole is large enough for your wire to go through. But what you can do is then, as you're making these knots with your beads, you can add some smaller beads to the outside. So when you're making your outside rows, just on the outside wire, when you're caging in your bead, you could add in some smaller beads and just add in however many would fit to go around that center bead, the main beads that you're using. So in this case I'll probably add 2 to that, and you could do that all the way if you wanted to, and then that will give an extra nice design feature, and you could do that all the way. So that's just a little design idea that you could do if you wanted to. But otherwise, like I said, you just want to continue doing this however you want to do it design wise until you reach the length that you feel your bracelet needs to be. So I've now continued adding my beads all the way down in the exact same way, and I feel like it's going to be a pretty good length, because when I measure it using measuring tape here, put the beginning all the way up to the very beginning of the macrame part that we did with just the macrame with the wire, and then measure down here, and then where my last bead ends, so my last knot, is so far almost at 6.5 inches. And what we have to do now is replicate this piece that we made at the top, so that's going to add just a little bit more length, and that is almost about 1 inch depending on how long you made it really. So keep that in mind, you want to leave space for that, and then also we need space for whatever clasp that you're using to attach that at the end. So this is going to end up being somewhere between a 7 and a 7.5 inch bracelet. So just to let you know the amount of beads that I've ended up using these specific materials, so the ones I mentioned in the beginning of the video, so these sides beads, and then also this gauge of wire, because like I said, you can change it up a little if you want to. You can use different size beads and also a different gauge of wire. But in this case, I've ended up using 16 beads in the middle row, and the 2 outside ones, I have 15 on each side. So that in total gives me 46 beads. So that can just give you a rough idea of how many you'll need. So now to create this last piece of macrame where we're not adding any more beads, so basically to be able to finish off the bracelet, what I'm just going to do is, as you can see, some of my working wires here have gotten really short, and that's absolutely fine because we'll just use these as the holding wires now. But if you do find they get a bit short towards the end, what you can always do to help you is take some pliers, some chain nose, flap nose, whatever you have, and then just use them to help you tighten up your knots at the end. But obviously just be careful, because you are using pliers, that you don't accidentally kind of make the wires snap or anything, make it kink unnecessarily. But you can do that gently. So now what we need to do is just make our last few macrame knots. So all these 5 wires in the middle here, what I'm going to do is just release the 2 outer ones here of the holding wires and just bring them all together. So you can just gently use your fingers to guide them in place. So they're all coming down the same way. And then I'm just going to reposition them all in the same slot down here, so they're all kind of going in the same place like this, because they're all going to then act again as almost like one holding wire, just like the beginning, because we're going to make our knots around all of these together. So now we've got all our wires in place. So now we have these 2 working wires left that we used all along as well, along the bracelet when we added the beads. So we're just going to go back to making a square knot, just like the whole time. Start from the same side you started with throughout. I'm just going to take my left one, put that over everything in the middle, take the other one over this, and then down underneath everything in the middle, and up through the loop. So the exact same knot, and then just tighten this, and you'll end up having it sitting right underneath your very final knot that you did on the middle row there. So like that. And then to finish that off, do the other side. So nothing different here, we're doing the exact same knots that we've done throughout the whole bracelet. And just remember, because you're working with wire, that it just works a little bit different than working with cord. Like that. And then you just keep doing that, filling up this side of your bracelet with some square knots. And I would just recommend doing the same amount that you did on the other side, so you can just go back and count how many you did. So in this case, I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So about 5 or 6 knots is what I recommend to do, just so you get the same on both sides and makes it nice and even looking. So I've now finished creating these knots at the bottom, so now we can take it off the board, because we're done working with it on the board. So like this, and here you have almost your finished bracelet. All that's left to do now is for us to finish off the ends. So all we need to do is we need to get rid of all these excess wires, so cut them down, the ones that are running through the bracelet, and then our 2 working wires here as well, get rid of those as well. And what I'm going to do is take my 2 working wires here, take one at a time, and then this is coming out towards the back from the very last knot. I'm just going to take it around the back like this, and then just below that knot, around these wires, all the rest of them, just about once or so, that's fine. And then go in, get my flush cutters or wire cutters, whatever you have, cut that off like that. And then you can always, just to make sure that nothing's sticking out too much, it won't matter too much about this because we're going to be covering this with a ribbon end, so there shouldn't really be anything sticking out, but there's no harm in making sure. So that's one. Do the same with the other one, bring that across and then around just about once, and then cut that off. Again, just squeeze down the end like that. Make sure everything sits the way it's supposed to, and then what we really need to do is go in and cut these lengths off, and I'm just going to cut them down to where they're coming out. You can just do one at a time. So like this, taking one wire at a time, cutting it down. So we'll get rid of all the excess wire, and we have a nice and neat end like this that we can then put a ribbon end onto. And then once you've done that end, you just need to go to the other end as well, get rid of these. You can either just cut them down because you don't have any excess working wires from here, because here we just started out the knot, or you can just take 1 or 2 of these, just wrapping it around once like we did at the other end, whatever you feel comfortable with. Just going around about once or something, because again this is going to be hidden inside the ribbon end. So like that, and then again we just cut off the rest all the way down to where the knots end. So to finish off the ends nicely, so we can also attach a clasp, what I'm going to do is get my ribbon ends out, and these are just the ones that I feel fit perfectly in the size. If you're using different materials, you might need to use different size ribbon end. But then we're just going to attach these to the very ends, so they're nice and neat, and also so nothing there's scratching or catching on anything. And also so we can attach our clasp at the end as well. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to get some of my glue out, and I like using my E6000 for this because it dries clear, so if anything spills out you won't really be able to see it, but also it's really strong, so that's going to really help with the durability of the piece. And then just do one ribbon end at a time, and then I like to just use a toothpick because it can give you a bit more control, and just get a little bit of glue on your toothpick. You don't want to use too much because it'll just come spilling out, but just enough to coat the inside of the ribbon end here. And also this is a small ribbon end, so we don't need much glue. So like that, when you feel like you have enough glue in there, coating the sides. You can also put a little bit of glue around the end here, but you don't need to put too much, just to kind of get in there in between the knots and the wire, because that's going to really make it adhere to each other. When you're happy with that, you then when I get the ribbon end, place it onto the end here, like this. And I like to keep hold of my piece kind of in my hand, so I can use my thumb and my finger like this to hold it in place when I'm squishing it down, because I need to get now my chain nose pliers out to squeeze it down. But you don't want to just go in on the one side and just squeeze it. You want to gently do a little at a time, moving across like this, so you make sure the whole time that it stays in the right place, so your piece stays in the middle of your ribbon end. And then once you're almost there and you're happy with how it sits, you can go in and give it a last squeeze like this and make it nice and tight. And then I like to just go in on the sides as well and clamp them down nicely like that. And then you just want to repeat. Obviously just leave this to dry so the glue gets nice and secure in there and it helps hold the whole piece in place. But do the same thing on the other end. Place your ribbon end on here, and then all that's left to do is use these ribbon ends to attach whatever findings and clasp that you want to use. So now I've finished off both ends and I've also attached my clasp and my extender chain. So all that's left to do now is bend this into shape. And if you have something round or oval shape that's about the right size, you can always bend it around that. Otherwise, you can also easily just use your hands like this. So what I usually do is start towards the middle and grab hold of the whole piece and then gently do it a bit at a time, moving from one side to the other and just putting a curve in there, but doing it gently and gradually so you get a nice curve that's going to fit your wrist, and you can make it a bit more oval shape. So something like this, almost there. So just take a little bit of time doing this until you're happy with it, and then once you're done, if you've already attached your clasp, then you have your finished bracelet, and it looks like this. So you have, it's a triple row macrame technique, but because you're using wire, you have this rigidity to the piece, and it's more of a cuff style, but obviously with a clasp as well for extra security. So this is how it looks. You can obviously do whatever design combination that you want with your beads and wire, and like I said, even add some smaller beads along the outside. So this is your finished piece. So that's how you make this. So I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching. Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this large waves wirework bracelet. And this is what it looks like. So you have these like large wave shapes going around your beads with some wire weaving in it. So if you want to learn how to make that, then stay tuned. And here are the things that we'll need.